Hello and good morning. This is Kelsey from Kelsey Reads Things at Anna Porter Public Library in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And I am very excited to be discussing with you today Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi. Yolk is a young adult, coming of age, sort of becoming yourself young adult book. I'm not sure I could have picked a more elegant way to express that or explain the general premise or purpose of the book, but there that is. But anyway, it is a young adult book about two sisters who are both very much estranged from each other. They are very, very different in their personality types, and one is older by 3 years. That's June, and the youngest is Jane. And Jane, I believe, is 20. June is 23. They are living in New York City at the beginning of this book, and the perspective follows Jane's consciousness. A lot of the book reads as if it's just her thinking to herself, which was really unique, and I really liked that about the book. I think it gives the audience an opportunity to even kind of connect even more fully with the main character. So I want to go ahead and just let my viewers know that, as you know, I never give age recommendations for books. I usually just tell you what the general category is, but according to the publishers of Yolk, this specific book, they do recommend it for ages 14 plus. Again, it's in our young adult room, and anyone and everyone who is interested in this book is allowed to check it out. I just like to go ahead and let you all know that there is an age recommendation, and I personally believe that this book probably should have been published under new adult. However, that category hasn't exactly taken off in the library career, nor even in the bookstore pathway. So I think that publishers may even be kind of getting away from that category for age. So just for the time being, it is in our young adult room, and you are welcome to check it out, especially if you enjoyed this book review. Speaking of book review, I should probably go ahead and tell you the plot. So, as I mentioned, Jane and June are two, I'm not sure if it's American Korean or Korean American girls who are sisters, and they are both currently living in New York City. However, they don't have a relationship. They do not speak to each other. There was an event that occurred, I think it was approximately like 5 years prior in their life, and because of that event, it was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, I think is the saying. And ever since, they just don't really have a lot to do with each other, especially Jane, the main character, and the younger sister, in regards to June. However, one evening, June seeks Jane out to inform her that she has been diagnosed with cancer. And for once, it is up to poor, mild-mannered Jane to try and take care of her very spunky, very assertive, very large personality of a sister, June. But Jane, along the way, will also learn how to take care of herself as well. And it's because of this diagnosis that brings these two sisters who used to have nothing to do with each other back together. And that's the general premise and plot of Yolk. So now I'm going to go ahead and mention there are a few triggers, so to speak, in this book. That includes body dysphoria, eating disorders, cancer, obviously, toxic family environments, and there was a little bit of child abuse as well. And some of the themes of this novel definitely include complicated familial relationships, as well as, body image and self-care, self-love, and just in general, some really tough topics. This book was definitely a literary read. There were It was modernly written. It was very modernly written. It was definitely, the target audience was very clear to me. I'm pretty sure the audience is supposed to be for young adults. However, again, you can read whatever you want. I just know specifically based on the writing style of this book that it's meant to attract young adult audiences, and probably and even like young adults. If 20 and up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Speaking of which, if you're not a fan of crude language, then this may not be the right book for you. I do believe that the language used was relatively appropriate for certain scenes in the books, especially in conversations between Jane and June. It felt very natural. However, again, there's always, different strokes for different folks, and if you're not interested in reading about these very heavy topics as well as dealing with like crude and rude language, then again, this book just may not be for you, and that's okay. Hopefully I'll review a book someday that is for you and might catch your interest. Okay, so now that I've talked about the general premise and plot, I would like now to go ahead and let you know a few things about my thoughts of this book overall. So it was an incredibly honest, real, genuine voice. I almost felt like I knew Jane by the end of the book because she was just, like I said, exceptionally honest. I think I mentioned in the beginning of this video that her monologue, her inner monologue, was like a stream of consciousness. And because of that, there was just so much more realness to her than I have seen in some other main characters. I don't necessarily want to call her a protagonist because there's not exactly a whole lot of plot with this book specifically. It's more about relationships as well as relationships to our bodies. And just because of that, like I said, I felt just so connected to Jane by the end. And I thought that the author's take of writing Jane and her inner thoughts and just I don't know how else to explain it. I just thought that it was very well done, and it definitely fit the themes of this book. And I think I know why. I think I can explain that now. There is something that gets revealed about Jane the more you read into the book, and I'm not going to say really any more about that, so I think that having her consciousness be the main thing you're reading about, and as it divulges and you learn more about Jane herself and her past, and honestly some things that she's in denial about, it's almost like it clicks whenever the battles that Jane is fighting herself, aside from revolving around her sister, that she's just fighting herself. It was just a huge reveal, I guess I should say, but it also made sense. So her voice, being as honest as it was really interesting in terms of what she was honest about to herself and what she was in denial about. And because of that, it just felt so honest to me, because that's how humans are. We deny things until you just kind of come to a breaking point. So Jane was actually a character I had a little bit of trouble relating to at first. When we're first introduced to Jane, she's a 20-year-old fashion student. Yeah, she's studying fashion art at some university in New York City. I'm not even sure if it ever mentions the university. It probably does. Anyway, she, like I said, is kind of just scattered. She's all over the place. She's in denial about a few of her inner issues. She has nothing really to do with her family. She's been struggling with her own identity her entire life in terms of her Korean culture and also American culture, wanting to just fit in so badly and doing kind of whatever it takes to fit in, and unfortunately being strung along by people who are not good for her. She also had a bit of a bitter attitude, but again, the more that gets revealed about her past, the more it makes sense. And she could kind of be selfish at times, for sure, but again, because she was just such an honest, genuine character, and because I got to know her better and understand her more thoroughly by the end, she was definitely a character I can relate to. And I loved Jane. By the end of this book, I loved her. I can honestly say that. That brings us to June. June is the older sister who gets diagnosed with cancer, and she is a force to be reckoned with. While Jane is living in pretty much poverty in an illegal sublet in New York City, her sister June is kind of the exact opposite. She has some sort of job in, God, I don't even know. I think she was some kind of lawyer or some kind of actuary, something of that nature. She had a very important financial job, and she was extremely well off, lived by herself in New York City. June is a spitfire. She's kind of vicious. She will definitely make you face the things that you're not admitting to yourself. Looking at you, Jane. But she also had intense loyalty to her family. That was something I really appreciated about June's character. Another thing I absolutely loved about this book and about the journey that these sisters go on is just all the real world issues that are brought up, including, eating disorders, culture clashing, and trying to kind of figure out your identity between two different worlds, familial abuse, immigrant struggles. I'm not sure if that's the proper way to say that, but struggles that people who immigrate from other countries that come to the United States, that was a big theme in this book. And finally, cancer. I really enjoyed reading about Jane and June and their relationship in the beginning, and as it blossoms and grows and ebbs and changes by the end. You should know that this book, for me, it actually wasn't necessarily a tearjerker, which was surprising. I definitely expected it to be, with the description of one sister getting cancer at 23 years old. However, there is some hope, a message of hope. And one thing I absolutely loved is that for the longest time, Jane felt so disconnected from her family, and part of that was her own doing, part of that was to protect herself from, past experiences, but by the end, she does reconnect, and it's so beautiful. It's almost like the cancer brought the two sisters together. I know that sounds terrible, but I will say the ending ends on a mostly happy, positive note. So that's all I'm really going to say. I probably shouldn't have even said that, but if you're hesitant about reading books that are going to make you cry, I don't actually think this one will. And I'm definitely a crier when it comes to books that I'm invested in. So if that maybe sways your opinion, I hope it does, and if it doesn't, that's fine. Just wait till next week when I'm discussing a new book. Maybe you'll like that one. It's also very clear to me that Jane is exceedingly depressed throughout this entire book. Her behavior is kind of reckless. She's very sporadic about certain things, and again, at times she was just a jerk. She was just a jerk. But so was June. So I think it kind of balanced out. And one last thing I loved about this book before I conclude the video for today, I just want to say that from Jane's perspective, June is just like impenetrable. She is, hard as stone. She's unreasonable. She's difficult. It's her way or the highway. But the more that we read into the relationships, the more that you understand each sister from the other sister's perspective. My opinions about both of them actually changed because of their relationship to each other and what they revealed as the relationship was ebbing and changing. And I really loved the dialogue between them and how, again, just very real it felt. It very much felt like two sisters. There was definitely that bitterness there. There was definitely that fierce love and loyalty there. There was that understanding there of dropping things at a hat. That's not the same. There was just such an honest voice between the two of them and the dialogue between them. And at times their dialogue was hilarious, and at other times it was serious and heartbreaking. And this book just made me feel so many emotions, especially in terms of dealing with basically everything that's in this book except for maybe culture clashes. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that I am Caucasian, so I have never had that experience. And one last thing, I think I said that before, but I loved that the honest voice of the main character, Jane. She saw her family in one light in the beginning of the book. But again, as we go further on, as we divulge into the story a little bit more and more is revealed. And I really loved the fact that you could see kind of the ugly truth of what it's like to grow up in a toxic family. But at the same time, it kind of gave me the feel that there is toxicity in every family, and you kind of sometimes have to pick your battles in a way, I guess I should say. I am not at all trying to say that you should immediately forgive people who have wronged you, family or not, toxic or not. That is not at all what I'm saying here. I just think that it was very honest in terms of that there is toxicity in families. There's always going to be, you know, dysfunction, I guess I should say. Maybe not always, but it's very common because humans are flawed. And I like that Jane kind of realizes that her family, for the most part, was just doing the best that they knew how. And sometimes that's all you can ask out of the people that you love, and vice versa. All that being said, I loved this book. It was incredible, relatable. It made me feel so many things. I didn't cry, surprisingly. I did not cry, but I did relate to a lot of Jane specifically and her struggles. And because of that, because it affected me so strongly, because it was so well written, because it was such an honest, genuine voice, I gave Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi 5 stars. Thank you for viewing my video today. Thanks for stopping by and humoring me as I discuss books. I really enjoy this part of my job, and my viewers make it worth it. So thank you so much. Next week I will be discussing Beach Read by Emily Henry, and that was also a fantastic, deep book. It does have romance in it, but I honestly feel like it was more of a literary read than anything. And I can't wait to tell you more and on why I feel that way. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic Friday and a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Be safe out there.